This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining me today. With me is Richard Fields and John Cameron, as per usual. Okay, today, last week, or maybe at the time you guys air the show, it'll be 2 weeks, Joe Biden had issued a vaccine mandate for federal workers, essentially covering about 100 million non-government workers. It's not even counting the government workers, I think, is how they described it. Anyway, a huge chunk of American workforce is now covered by a vaccine mandate. But is it actually a law? And what happens if you don't want to get the shot?
It's a regulation. It's an OSHA regulation. And back in the 70s, when OSHA was passed, I was vehemently against it because I thought, what the safety regulations are on a job site should be between the employee and the employer. If a job site is too dangerous to work in, don't work there. Go work for somebody that's more safety conscious. And if you have an unsafe work site, you're not going to get the best workers. So the mutual motive for the employer and the employee is to have a safe website or a workplace. But once you put a regulation in place, it can be used for all kinds of nefarious purposes, and that's what's happening here. People who already have had COVID and are more immune to getting reinfected than those who have had the vaccine, you got to get the vaccine anyway, or get fired. That's simply an overreach as far as regulation is concerned. And once you start regulating, once you start giving the power to legislate to a regulatory agency, which is what's happened here, then you've gone to the point where it's not the people's representatives who are making the laws, it's the president's appointees who are making the laws. And that's essentially a step on the road to tyranny.
I absolutely agree. And what's interesting is the number of people in healthcare industries that are refusing to get vaccinated when their hospital requires it, and resigning in droves. I don't know. Was this what we were going to cover?
Yeah, we got it. We'll blend it. It's fine. Keep going.
Yeah, there's a hospital in kind of a rural hospital that is going to have to shut down its baby delivery department because a whole bunch of people work there said that they'd rather resign than get the vaccine. So,
well, John, to clarify, it was a whole rural hospital system. 7 hospitals in total have to stop delivering babies because the people who deliver babies, too many of them resigned. When they were mandated the vaccines, too many of them resigned. It's 7 hospitals in the New York State. And yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of clarify what we were talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm not here to say that vaccination is a bad thing. I'm vaccinated. I think it's a good thing. But it is not the role, or should not be the role of government to mandate somebody getting vaccinated. If you get vaccinated and you actually believe that the vaccine will protect you from infection or from a more dire version of the disease, get vaccinated. If you don't, and you believe that the vaccination will protect you, then you don't have to worry about people who are not vaccinated. Now, I don't think that I think the vaccine has its limitations, and I think that's what the science is saying. You can be vaccinated and still be contagious and still get the disease, et cetera, and so on. But it's not the role of government to be mandating that. It's the role of the private employee or private employer in agreement with his employees to say, maybe, we'll make our own decisions as to which is the more dangerous, getting vaccinated with a largely experimental vaccine, or getting natural immunity and taking our chances with dying of COVID. Neither is a best of all possible worlds, but it should not be the role of the government at any level to make the decision for you on which of two not particularly good outcomes you choose.
I agree, and if you put some logic on, there are people in the healthcare industry, some areas of it that are like 97% vaccinated. If I was working in an ED, you guys, popular TV calls it ERs, around people who they didn't have time to do a test on them. You don't know whether they're COVID positive or not, and they come in there and there's blood and you're moving around to save somebody's life, so you can't be as planful about making sure you're in N95 masks in place. But in a maternity ward, everybody that goes in there, you're not going to catch it from the infant, the wife, the mother, not necessarily wife. I didn't mean to make any judgments about marriage and child rearing. Is going to have been tested as part of a pre-op, even though it's not an operation, it's a naturally occurring event. They treat it as if it's operation, and they test people for COVID before they go in. So this is a very controlled environment with very low risks of COVID being brought into the workplace. And to have those people have to act as if, again, this is the one-size-fits-none government program. The people who people who are at most at risk were treated most cavalierly early in this pandemic. A former governor of a state that is the only reason why Democratic presidents are elected, I guess I can name it, New York, forced nursing homes where aged people with suppressed immune systems to accept people back who were basically contagious with COVID, and as a result killed 20,000 people. But that's a place where, if you want to have some kind of mandate, but still it should be the choice of, as Richard said, it should be a choice between the employee and the employer.
And the customer.
Yeah, and the customer.
Yeah.
The employer should be completely truthful and straightforward about the risk, not only the risk that the employee should know or the customer should know, but some risks they don't know, because the employer is going to know more about the safety of their business than anybody on the outside. Share those risks, and if people are willing to take them, then that's a choice between consenting adults. And so anyway, I'm in absolute agreement.
And the problem with mandates is the unintended consequences. When government issues mandates, they don't think about how people who were 4 months ago were perfectly capable of taking care of patients are now being fired because they're now not capable of taking care of patients. It's the same people who got us through the pandemic are now being fired because it's unsafe for them to help care for people during the pandemic. It's the unintended consequences. And then we also have to think about the long-term unintended consequences. Right now, we're talking about vaccine passports, but how long is that going to be? Are the vaccinated going to say, hey, why do I have to show the paperwork? When is it going to be put on the unvaccinated to prove that they're the unvaccinated? You have to wear essentially a scarlet letter of some sort. The long-term unintended consequences are the most frightening of these things when we accept these kind of mandates.
Well, and I think that I agree if these consequences were unintended, but I think they're simply part of, whenever the government can stop you from doing something and making a decision on your own and impose its will from above, it will do so. And eventually, if you beat people up with enough of that kind of nonsense, then they're going to feel as if it's the government's right to do these things, which we know it isn't. They're overstepping their bounds left and right and all the rest. The idea that if this vaccine mandate that's being handed down from above, electronically connected. I had to disconnect what was probably a spam call. If it's handed down under the auspices it's going to improve health, why does the government only care about the health of people in businesses that employ more than 100 people? Logically,
yes, the answer is because that's where they have the jurisdiction under OSHA.
Yeah, well, logically, unsafe working conditions should be greater with businesses that are startups because they're more thinly capitalized. So there's no logic to it. As Richard said, this is where they have the power. Anyway, we beat this to death. Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about having no logic to it. infrastructure is now everything. They're working the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill is working its way through, as if we haven't spent enough money. But
Yeah, infrastructure now includes healthcare, includes paid leave, childcare, subsidies for electric vehicles, the whole panoply of climate change arresting remedies, housing, building housing, subsidies for community colleges. And of course, it includes things like Amtrak, which has been a great thing to fund over these many years. That's been a real winning infrastructure investment. And the example that I like best is the Pittsburgh Airport, which is the 5th largest airport in the country and is mostly empty because evidently politicians in Pennsylvania had enough pull to get a huge airport that they didn't need, and now it's built and mostly standing empty. There's another airport like that in Ontario, not far from me, that's mostly empty. The whole idea of infrastructure has been bent and molded and shaped and distorted to include essentially the entire wish list of the left in America, which is cradle to grave welfare and healthcare and you name it.
Hmm. And cradle to grave, massive bureaucracies and jobs for people who pay union dues to government unions, which is the only place there's really any unions left, who then support the same politicians who've created the massive bureaucracies. So the massive bureaucracies grow so they can hire more employees to support those same. I could go on for the next hour, but you get my drift here. It's not about who they're going to help or anything else. It's about talking points. It's about convincing a few pieces of the population to believe that they are subjugated, so they constantly vote for the fools who are subjugating them.
And it's more than that. It's since it's not paid for, and even the draconian tax increases that Biden is asking for in this bill won't even come close to paying for the $3.5 or whatever it is trillion that is being proposed. We're looking at funding it almost entirely through inflation, through increasing the money supply, which will inexorably lead to inflation. That will hurt not the rich. The rich can protect themselves against inflation very nicely because assets rise in price before consumer goods. But those who don't have assets are going to get stuck when the groceries go up and gasoline goes up and everything that you buy in order to have a life goes up in price. That's the middle class and the poor, those who the Democrats claim to be trying to help.
And then they're pitching out, I guess Bernie's going out on the road trying to pitch this to middle class America. And I don't know which organization did the study, but it was a pretty reputable one. I think it was a New York Times article. I'm quoting sources now. This is from a New York Times article that they crunched the numbers, and Bernie Sanders was talking about how we just need to make sure the billionaires pay their fair share. Well, first let's talk about fair share. If they're getting 20% of government services, they should pay 20% of their income. But they're paying, the rich always pay a much higher proportion of their income, and the rich don't depend on the services that the government is providing because they are, they have private health care. Many of them have concierge physicians. They don't hang out in parts of town where they need police protection because that's not where the good parties are. So, but Bernie was talking about taxing the billionaires, making them pay their fair share. Even if you confiscated the wealth of all billionaires, 100% of their wealth in the United States, it would not pay for this infrastructure program. And there's no way you can do that. So, the idea that you're going to pay for it, as Richard pointed out, by taking more money from the wealthy who are already paying the gross amount of the tax burden is ludicrous. It's a lie. They're just going to do it by printing money.
Well, to be fair to those who decry the wealthy are also benefiting the most from the inflationary policies. So it's not exactly a losing inflationary policies are not a losing proposition for those who already have great wealth.
Yeah. Well, if you take all their wealth away from them, they won't have any great wealth. So that's the point I'm making. Yeah.
Well, so let's ask another question. How much of this infrastructure spending is buying votes? How many of these people are actually
100%.
are there of the
Well,
same?
99%. Let's be fair. Some people are true believers that, hey, we're actually going to actually help the poor.
No, and then the other part of it is that the infrastructure is talking about the jobs bill and job creation, job growth, job. All of the studies out there, except those made up by the Democratic Party as they pass the bong around the room, um, indicate that all these bills are going to actually result in a net loss in GNP because of the inflationary impacts. And net loss of jobs. So it's lie. I want to ask this question of all of our. I guess we got about 8,631 people watching. Oh wait, that's a statistic. I can't use that. It's wrong. How many of those people out there understand that if we lie to Congress, we're guilty of a crime and could be thrown in jail? Congress may lie to us every single day. They can lie it's in the law. They can lie in their political ads. But if a commercial enterprise lied to current or future customers in their ads, they would be civilly liable and in some cases criminally liable.
If you lie to the FBI, you're automatically committing a felony and can go to prison for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yes.
The FBI,
If the FBI lies to you during an investigation and you respond to their lie with a lie, you're the one going to jail. And it's talk about absurd. And but we want to move on. With 9/11 just passing, the question was asked in The Hill: if another 9/11 happened today, could our nation unify? Could it be that unity we had on 9/12 be achieved again? But I want to point out that it was a cultural unity, not a political unity. I mean, the main disagreement I have with this perspective is they're pretending that we were politically unified, but we weren't. We were culturally unified. There's a difference.
And I think the answer is no, and that's a good thing. The fact that we were unified on 9/12 to wage war on the terrorists is what led to the debacle in Afghanistan, the debacle in Iraq, the impending debacle in Syria, the debacle in Libya, and has led to the bleeding of the American empire, because that's in actuality what we've become, to the point where we are in the same boat that England was in post World War II. We are losing our influence in the world, and our influence is not built upon guns and gunships and airplanes. Our influence, our rightful influence, is built upon the American idea, the American ideals of freedom as espoused in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, our used to be respectful civil liberties, and so on. That's why we are a magnet for the rest of the world as far as immigration is concerned. Not so much anymore, I don't think. We're in a situation now where the American idea is being despised and spat upon by the American political elites because it's in their they think it's in their electoral best interest. We have a situation now where I think it's a really, really good thing that we have actual debate. I realize it's censored dramatically by government, indirectly by government, because government controls the regulatory environment for all of the YouTubes and the Facebooks and so on. They control the regulatory environment, and unless those entities engage in government desired censorship, they're going to have their regulatory status changed, and not for the better. So we have a situation now where we have a whole lot of disagreement on COVID. We have a whole lot of disagreement on the political choices that we have today. And I think that disagreement is a good thing. And giving multiple voices to that disagreement is a good thing. It is the health of democracy for more than one voice to be heard. Back when we had only 3 establishment television networks and only 2 establishment newspapers, the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody else basically copied them. We were monolithic in our viewpoint, but that viewpoint was quite often wrong. It was wrong in Vietnam. It was wrong on 9/11. We caused 9/11 in many respects by interfering in the Middle East prior to 9/11. That's the facts of the matter, and the fact that we don't have that unity, I think, is a hopeful sign.
I want to add something to what Richard said. I agree with many of the things he said. I'm going to have to break myself out of this rut. I've been agreeing with Richard, my friend, a lot lately. The Hill article that brought up the speaking point said we can't agree on it. It compared the pandemic to 9/11, and so as if this this virus that that 600,000 Americans have died with, we'll have no idea of how many have died of ever, was the same thing. And in some respects, you look $600,000 deaths versus 2,200. You can make a case that this is a much greater threat to America, and we can't agree on it. But and how politicized and the ball batted around and all the rest of that. And so I don't think the two things are comparable. There are some people, some conspiracy theorists could state that this pandemic is part of, the Communist Party's germ warfare against the United States, but I don't think anybody's proved that yet. I think it's like comparing apples and oranges. But one of the wonderful points that the article made that was, and it didn't realize it was making, I don't think, is that journalists in the past reported, and now so-called journalists opinionize. And the problem wouldn't be as severe as it is now if journalists were politically fairly well split between, let's say, conservatives and regressives. I would.
Or how about if they were spread the spectrum, the political spectrum, represented the political spectrum.
97% of journalists, unless and fix me on this one if I'm wrong on the quote, lean to the left, people who call themselves journalists. So if they're simply reporting the facts, that wouldn't be a problem. But if they're reporting the facts or misreporting the facts or opining in their piece, then it's a real problem. And if all of the information is swayed in one direction, and we still have much of the American people resistant to the attempted propaganda, I say my applause to the American people for spotting this and fighting this propaganda that's basically state-sponsored. So I think it's a good thing. I agree with Richard.
Yeah, no, and the difference, the Hill made a big deal of saying it's all social media's fault because social media gave the journalists the opportunity to bare their souls and disclose their prejudice or their leaning, their bias to one side of the political aisle or the other. And they all showed themselves to be liberals and anti-Trumpistas. Well, we're anti-Trumpistas too, but so what? The fact that there are very, very few libertarian or Republican journalists is telling. And I think there's a cultural reason for that. I think the people who are used to dealing with logic and reason going into the hard sciences, they're engineers and they're bridge builders and their business executives, etc. Those who never figured out how to deal with mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, and the sciences, they tend to go to the soft sciences, namely political science, social science, English, literature, that sort of thing. And those are the people that end up in journalism school and end up being the opinionators at the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the cable networks and so on. So you have a cultural divide where those who actually know something about science are censored in effect, censored in fact, by those who claim to be representing science, but in fact are not educated in sciences.
All right, well, I want to get to this one last topic real quick before we run out of time. Restaurants in San Francisco San Francisco is banning chain store restaurants. Like you can't open a Burger King in San Francisco anymore. You can call it King Burger, but you can't open Burger King. Is this a violation of the First Amendment, or is it just stupid?
It's both.
Both. Yeah. Yeah. What's if you look at trends that are going to be adopted, stupid trends that are ludicrous and have horrible unintended consequences. Look to San Francisco first. Look to the Bay Area, and then watch other people copy them, as with them some crazy vaping laws that we don't have time to talk about today. The idea was they wanted to protect the local businesses against national chains, so there wasn't a Subway on every corner, a Burger King on every corner, a Starbucks on every corner, which I'd like to see because I only have to walk one block then for my coffee. Now I have to sometimes, never mind, it's a whole nother rant. But what they didn't take into account when they set this stupid thing up, again, one size fits none, and it's patently a violation of First Amendment and is stupid, is that some successful local organizations that people in the Bay Area love can't open enough storefronts to provide locally a local entrepreneurial institution with an opportunity to grow and hire more people and to provide food that the locals want to eat. So once again, government program, one size fits none. They might have had some high ideals on the one hand.
No, it's not a high ideal. It's the idea that I like the scenery the way it is. And the scenery includes not just my property, but everybody else's property within my eyesight. And I don't want the scenery cluttered up by a McDonald's golden arches. So even though that scenery actually belongs, the real estate belongs to somebody else, I'm going to tell that somebody else they can't do anything that offends my sensibilities. Therefore, I'm going to make it a law to outlaw McDonald's, and I'll do it in a roundabout way by saying, well, what I'm really doing is protecting, Fats Pizza or the local joint, whatever it happens to be. They're not protecting the local joint. They're saying, I want to protect my scenery by making scenery that I don't like illegal. That is not only elitist gibberish, but it's also unconstitutional, or should be.
Well, and most of these are franchises, and so they are local businesses.
Yeah,
they've just taken a shortcut, essentially a marketing shortcut, and so they're not even doing what they're actually wanting to do. They just hate McDonald's, and I had this down the street from my house. They wanted to build a McDonald's a block from my house, and essentially it was, we don't want to see it, and so it got turned down, and that's. And with turning down, we are out of time. We want to thank John and Richard for being here. I want to thank you all for watching. You can see us next week, and please remember to love it.
Thank you, James. Thank you, John.